Welcome to the Reboot Chronicles, your gateway to the world's most influential leaders who are rebooting their organizations and themselves to thrive in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeBias, CEO who's rebooted dozens of companies, creating billions in value. My passion is uncovering inspiring reboot stories. So buckle up, lean in, and please share this episode with a friend. It may help reboot their career and their life. Welcome to the Reboot Chronicles. Today we're coming to you live from William Blair's global headquarters in Chicago. And today we're joined by a two-time Olympian, five-time NCAA All-American, Simon Arkel. After an impressive athletic career, Simon rebooted himself into a global tech innovator and serial CEO. With a passion to develop a much-needed healthcare reboot, he founded 7 venture-backed companies, including Versify, Predixion, and DeepLens, which was a clinical trial matching company acquired by Paradigm Health, pretty successful exit. With a relentless passion to help cancer patients and discover how AI platforms can accelerate innovation and clinical research, he launched his next venture, Ryght. Ryght is a generative AI platform rebooting the old, slow, expensive Biopharma site selection process, enabling groups to quickly find and activate sites for their studies within a week or so. He's a board member of many companies, colleges, universities, and an LP investor. Simon is also a big supporter of Megan's Wings, who assists families of children diagnosed with cancer, and also founded Olympians for Business, helping athletes transition to business careers and life. Simon, good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Good to see you.
Yeah, you've got such an impressive track record, but just starting as an Olympian, just curious to hear how did you get into pole vaulting? Of everything you could have chosen, how did that one pop up?
Yeah, it's not your average sport to pick up and try to go to the Olympics with, that's for sure. But
I'm sure there's a business metaphor in here somewhere, though.
There is, yeah. Clear the bar, like set the bar high, all the obvious ones. But there's some dirty ones too, which I won't share.
Yeah. Different show.
Yeah, different show. But I grew up in Australia, in a town called Adelaide, which is the capital of South Australia, and went to a great school, had great friends, good family. Really, just loved sport. My stepdad was a track and field coach, and so he got me into running originally. Then I tried pole vaulting with one of my good friends and just fell in love with it. We both did. I sucked at it. He was really good. We got invited to go to the local club, and so the good coaches were all over my best friend. And I got to tag along and really was very, very mediocre at it for a long time. But, it's just, I think that's where I learned that I'm a pretty persistent dude, and just kept going at it for a long, long time. A lot of failures along the way. My first 2 national championships, I no-heighted, which is where you fail to clear even the first opening bar. Devastated, just for some reason, just kept doing it. And then I went and saw a documentary about the Olympic Games with my stepdad and decided then and there that I wanted to go to the Olympics one day. It was just such an awe-inspiring thing to see, and decided that pole vaulting would be my vehicle. So I just got serious with it at that point, decided that I was going to train harder than anyone and see what would happen with it. So that got me to an athletic scholarship in the US, where I improved a ton, competing in the NCAA for New Mexico. And after that, had broken a 17-year-old national record for Australia, and then was selected for my first Olympics in '92. So it was a fun career.
Yeah, I bet. And it was really impressive how you transitioned into business, and we'll get into that in a second. But in your formative years, what were the big influences on you? You mentioned your dad, obviously, and actually just going out and experiencing those events probably totally clicked for you.
Yeah. I think I learned the most when I failed, and as embarrassing when you're in sport, it's quite. Yeah. I think any athlete is doing a pretty courageous thing because they're putting it out there very publicly, and they say that you got to, put it out on the actual playing field and not be in the bleachers, and that's what you're doing. And so when you succeed, you're flavor of the month and everyone loves you. But when you fail, it's extremely embarrassing, sometimes painful, but it's very visible, and you learn the most about yourself in those situations as an athlete. And so for me, I know I had those failures when I first started. There weren't that many people watching when I was 13 and 14, but then my first ever international for Australia was the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh in Scotland. And
oh wow, a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I had a bit of an injury in the lead up to that, but there was a lot of pressure. Everyone I'd ever met was watching on TV, and I very much underperformed, and I was pretty devastated. But I got so inspired by watching the guy who did win the gold medal that day that I literally obsessed about that every day for 4 years. And when I made the Commonwealth Games team 4 years later, in 1990, I won the gold medal and jumped a Commonwealth Games record in front of a huge stadium full of people, international TV. Like, it was like a defining moment for me and such a great life lesson. And then, to then kind of get good enough to go on and make it to World Championships and Olympic Games was pretty special.
I bet. You said something there that most people don't do. It's like being able to celebrate other people's success at the behest of your own. It's like sometimes it's their turn, and some of the best thing you can do is not just celebrate it, but learn from it. It almost that person probably was a silent mentor almost for you, probably at that point.
I think so. Yeah, and we're in an event where you really need a lot of help because it's so dangerous. You need people to catch your steps, so if your foot's a foot under or a foot out after a 140-foot run, when you're coming in at 10 meters per second, extremely fast, and then basically launching yourself into the air. If you're off and you don't realize it when you're coming down at that speed, then you can really badly hurt yourself, get thrown off the side of the pit. There've been some pretty bad accidents over the years. And so you come to rely on your competitors, and it creates a camaraderie because everyone's calling the wind or catching a step or giving them some tips out there. And you're competing against the other guy. But at the same time, you become great friends because you're competing all over the world with them in the same type of environment. So it's a different sport. You don't really see that until Usain Bolt came along, especially in the 100. You would see these guys hating each other and staring each other down and being all cocky. But in the pole vault, it's very, very different.
Wow. There's probably a frenemy business metaphor in there. Let's come back to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was the transition like eventually into business? Was it a natural for you, a rocky road, or just evolution?
Yeah, it was very much an evolution. I actually think about this a lot, and that I was quite different in that I had this obsessive chip on my shoulder to succeed in my sport, but also I was very, very interested and intrigued with the technology world. In fact, my stepmom, who's with my dad in England, used to work for Business Week magazine, and she had a stack of 100 of these magazines. And when I was there for a week or so in between meets in Europe visiting, I would just inhale the Business Week magazine, especially the technology section. And I think it really set me up to want to be in the tech world. So thanks, Vera. And what I then did was, while I was still in college as an undergrad at New Mexico, I started my first business, and it was selling door to door down Central Avenue in Albuquerque, which is not the safest place in the world. Literally, getting doors slammed in my face while I was training full time and going to school full time. I was starting this company. I then did that again when I was doing my MBA up in San Luis Obispo at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California, and started a software export business. And then before the 96 Olympics, which was my last Olympic Games, I'd moved back to Australia from Cal Poly, and I started a telecommunications company called LCR Telecom. And again, just hardcore selling, very much door to door with, a small business there. So it really taught me a lot, but it allowed me to make, that transition much easier. I didn't have the ability to get a 9-to-5 job while I was competing, and I definitely didn't want to get one after I finished competing because I was so addicted to the startup world at that point.
Yeah, and the sales world. I started out in the sales world as well, right behind you here in this backdrop of Chicago. And back then, you brought up something very interesting. The door-to-door selling, B2B businesses, selling telecom services.
Yeah.
Same with me, how I started. That was a normal thing. That's what you did. Just like the magazines for you were your gateway to the world. There was an internet. There was a lot of, let's just call them younger business, aspiring to be business people. They don't get those opportunities anymore. There is no door-to-door. Selling is all, computerized. And what
I mean, you had probably the best training. I think it was for me too, because it was definitely hard knocks. But
Yeah.
what kind of advice would you give this next generation about, if you can't do that, you should be doing this. I mean, some of them don't even want to go in the office, so the camaraderie's gone. It's a very different world out there. What would you like to see? What would you like to tell them?
Well, I don't know. I try and I think about how I'd like my kids to live and have it just as tough as I did. But then
Sounds like my dad.
logically, I don't know that that's true. And I've come to the realization that I'd love them to really be scrappy, but also leverage what I've been able to build and kind of stand on my shoulders and then do the same for the future generation. And I think about that with current, 24-year-olds coming out of college. The world is so different now to where it was, 30 years ago. And I don't think you should just go door to door and get your teeth kicked in selling advertising space on Central Avenue. But
it's illegal. It's illegal now, by the way.
Okay. Well, you can sell yourself, but not your product. But I think it's important to try and figure out what the right mix is. So leverage. We use tools all the time to do lead gen, and whether it's on LinkedIn with some automated bot, or other tech that's out there that even just micro targeting and just doing lead gen and top of the funnel with a HubSpot or Salesforce type CRM. But that's not the same, as you pointed out. So how can you kind of interface the real world with some of these digital phenomenon that are going on and be even better off than we were back then, or if you only did the digital piece now?
I love that.
And it comes down to this simple lesson that people like doing business with people they like, and you're only going to create a true relationship with someone if you know them physically. Like you're physically in front of them, you're socializing with them, you grab lunch with them or a coffee, or you meet them. And so my advice is to get out there, use all of the kind of top of the funnel digital work to get to the right people, but get the meeting and make the effort to go and physically be in front of them. And then you're going to find a rapport. I'm still really good friends with business colleagues that I've met over the years. In fact, next Sunday, one of my good friends is coming to stay with us, and we just stayed with him and his wife in North Carolina a few weeks ago. And we met through business when I was trying to sell him some software.
I love that. I'm here like violently shaking my head. I had breakfast meeting this morning with two of our producers, just serendipitously. We all were in Chicago. And what we covered in an hour, we never could have done in terms of not being, together. And I feel that is missing. So you started out really scrappy, but eventually you said, you know what, I can run these businesses. I can own them. I can, I started my first one when I was a kid, similar to me, by the way. But you did it. You scaled it. You were very successful. But what was the hardest part about that jump? Because that's a huge jump from being a sales guy.
Yeah. My first proper tech company in California that got venture capital backing was one where I, again, feeling around in the dark, but was able to, with this one company I was working with, productize a service offering that we developed for a magazine, and that turned into basically a software product just by saying it was. And then when someone bought it for $250,000, which was Ingram Micro back in the day. We ended up, turning that into the product that I said it was, and then selling it to other people. And that turned into a company that got venture backing in the late 90s. So the transition from doing my own personal projects that I owned or controlled, and you could call them a company, but they were really just projects, to really having outside financial stakeholders is a much different energy. And you have a responsibility to return people's capital. And I've not returned people's capital a lot over the years, unfortunately, but I've also had the pleasure of returning a lot of capital to some people when it goes well. They just didn't know which it was going to be at the time, which is why they deserve, exactly, a lot of money when it works out. But
I'll refrain from VC jokes. We've had many of them on the program because we want them to keep coming. But that's why it shouldn't be called venture capital. It should be called risk capital. And the success rate is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But to constantly have a perfect exit success in every company it's most will say it's not impossible, but it is actually statistically it's improbable.
go highly. And, and when you look at when you do well, a lot of luck has to be involved. And, you make your own luck, and luck is where possibility meets opportunity, or whatever the saying is. And preparation meets opportunity, and you have to be prepared. You have to grind. You have to do the work, and then you have to be alive to get lucky. And there's, to make a sport metaphor to that one too. I once was jumping in Perth in Western Australia, which is known as the best place on the planet to pole vault because it's just got this perfect tailwind. So anyone who's jumped really high there, really, I won't say they didn't, but they definitely, had the perfect conditions to maximize the opportunity. And I cleared a national record at a Grand Prix meet there, and it was, I think, 18:11 at the time, 5:75, so 18:10 and a half. And at the time, it was legal to, if you hit the bar, I pulled it down about a foot, but I used to practice pushing the bar back on while I was still in midair. It's called vaultsing. It was invented by a guy named Dave Vaults in the 80s, but I used to practice it on a trampoline, and there were 2 or 3 other guys who were really good at it in the world, and I was one of the maybe 3 or 4. Two of the others were good friends of mine, kind of Dean and Greg. And anyway, I put the bar back on, and it was a national record. And some kid who was officiating, he was a younger vaulter. He went and he just said, "You got so lucky." And I remember it really. Obviously, I remember that 30 years later, because I think I said to him, "Yeah, but I mean, I got lucky, but I had to still be in the competition when the bar was at 18:11 and no one else was." And so you've got to be in it to win it, and you can get lucky as long as you're still in the game.
I just figured out the name of this episode. What you said, you make your own luck. I mean, you had the tailwind on you on that day. You had the focus, the concentration, the determination, and you did it. A lot of people don't show up and actually do it. What does drive you though? What's your passion, I guess, is the real question, and how does it drive you?
To me, it's whatever I'm very excited about at the time. And so, one of the best keynote commencement speeches I ever listened to was a guy named Tim Minchin, who delivered it also in Western Australia, coincidentally in Perth. And he's a very famous Australian entertainer who's, I think, based in London most of the time.
Yeah.
And he does not aspire to having long-term goals. And when he started talking about this in the commencement speech, it was just really like eye-opening to me, because I resonated so much with that concept. It's like, be extremely passionate about what's directly in front of you today. And of course, you have to be within the guardrails of what you see for yourself. So for me, it was obviously in my sport for me, and it had to be that sport. I wasn't going to just take up javelin and throw that all of a sudden, as opposed to pole vaulting. But within the context of what I want to do in my career or in my life, I do whatever is extremely exciting for me in that moment. And if that's excitement is there, that'll drive me to get up out of bed every day and continue to do it. And so that's basically it. The passion is absolutely needed. And you have to have that level of tenacity to be able to stick with something for long enough. But at the end of the day, excellence is something that I really admire in people. And I try and have that in what I do day to day, and try not to do things that don't really turn me on just because there may be money involved. So when I look at who I admire most in the world, it's people who are just really excellent at what they do. Like, I'm, hardly a Swiftie and definitely the wrong demographic, but I am in awe of someone like Taylor Swift, because she's so freaking good at what she does. She has perfected her art, and she does it for everyone to see, and it's incredible. And so anyone who just has incredible excellence in what they do, I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, and her silent mentors were probably like Gaga and maybe even Michael Jackson, who just took the exactitude of the performance to a new level. Have you? Sounds like you just rattled off a couple of your silent mentors there. We all have them, but who made the biggest impact on you?
I think it's people who may or may not know, but it's people I've watched who are just really good at what they do. They command kind of respect just by being and being in a room. I have a mentor who's, I think, 86, 87 now, and I met him when I was back at Cal Poly. His name is King Lee, And I think he knows that I'm his mentor, but I mean, he's my mentor and I'm his mentee. But this is a guy who's just been excellent in business. He commands respect. He's a really great guy. He's caring about other people and just very successful in what he's done in his career. And, I really am drawn to people like that who are just excellent. They're good and they're good people. Another gentleman who I met in the last few years through my last company, who was an advisor to me and still is, Tom Pike. He's royalty in the clinical trials industry. And anyone who's in that industry would know his name. He was the CEO of Quintiles and created IQVIA, but he's an investor in my company. He was an advisor. He helped guide me and us through the exit of our last company. And he's just a wonderful guy who is just really a pleasure to be around. I've also gotten to know another gentleman lately who's was the founder of Medidata, a huge company that sold to Dassault for $6 billion. And he's their chairman now, Tarek Sharif, and talk to him all the time. He's an investor and an advisor. I love asking for advice from people who I really respect, because they always have something really positive to contribute.
Yeah. When you look at your life, the biggest challenges, what was your toughest personal reboot to overcome or to take you to the next level?
Yeah, there's been a few. Athletically, there were just a number of moments in time where I failed miserably and I had to make a decision. Tried to retire at one point after thinking that I had achieved my goals, until my best buddy and training partner at the time, Dean Starkey, said, "No, you haven't jumped 19 feet yet. You've jumped 18:10. Yes, you went to the Olympics, but your goal is 19 feet. You're not retiring. I'm not going to let you." And then I didn't, and he was right, and I jumped 19 feet. And so I thank him for that. But we
need people like that pushing us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. People who know you well enough and they're not afraid of being honest with you. But there've been a number of times where I considered just folding in and kind of calling it quits on the entrepreneur front, the founder front, because founding a company is so damn hard. Everyone kind of reads about Elon Musk, wants to be like him when they grow up, but you get the shit kicked out of you. You get kicked in the teeth on a weekly basis, and it can be emotionally very, very draining. It's also, they say that the CEO role is the loneliest job in the world. Sometimes it really is, because you have to be transparent with your team, but you can't just share every emotion you're going through, or they're going to be on the roller coaster unfairly to them.
Or they'll be gone.
Exactly. Or they'll be gone, yeah. You find out what they're made of when you start.
I have overshared sometimes as CEO, I admit this, yes.
Yeah. And so I would say the biggest one was a business relationship I was in 20 years ago that turned into a scorched earth World War VII fight. And it was extremely draining for years, and it's something I never want to go through again. And so I've become, I think, a lot better at picking people I choose to work with based on who they are as human beings, not just who they claim to be and how rich they may look. And I think that was a massive reboot for me, because it allowed me to get on and just really control my destiny a lot more and be around people who are good people. And that's what it's all about. I think relationships, and obviously financially you want to do well, you want your shareholders to do well, but to be able to work with people that are not going to try and screw you is really important.
You know what else I love about what you've taken the time, we're all busy, but you've taken the time to give back. So this Olympians for Business, Megan's Wings, you seem to have a passion about, cancer and medical, not just from a business point of view, but also just a human standpoint, which is, I think, remarkable. When you look at Olympians, or I'm working on a venture that's helping vets do a very similar thing, to assimilate and get back into whatever life, career, happiness, jobs. It's usually about jobs.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do you have for them?
Yeah. It's really, again, to figure out what drives you and what you can be passionate about. The big challenge for Olympians who were not starting companies or doing projects while they were competing, most rightly focus and train full time. And that's what they've got. And so they have a higher opportunity cost the longer they go with the sport. So it's actually quite ironic in that the better you are in the sport and the longer you decide to stay at it and win the medals and get the accolades, the higher the opportunity cost for what comes next. And so you find a lot of great athletes, Olympians, who are had very storied careers, who are really, really at a crossroads when they decide to retire. So I've met many who really have one option, and that's to be a coach of that sport because they haven't really found their passion outside of it. So I think just to do a lot of work while you're still competing, to find out do a lot of reading, research, meeting with people, talking to people, and just try and explore what else is out there and what you can get passionate about, and then go for that. The story I use is, someone who might have won an Olympic gold medal in rowing, then they retire after that Olympic Games, and then they get a job and they're making coffee for their boss who's 30. And so very, very quickly you go from this incredible adulation down to just like a harsh kind of kick in the teeth where reality sets in. And so by identifying your passion earlier and working towards that, I think it's a good investment of time for these athletes. I've seen just countless people who have done it right and others who have done it the wrong way. Actually, I just have been kind of anointed with this role of being the chair for the LA 28 Olympics for a group that we put together called the LA 28 Australian Olympic Executive Club.
Oh, nice.
And what we're doing is we're having any Australian affiliated or Australian curious executives in Southern California and around the US get involved in events that are very sport related, that are either paired up with other big events that Australian government is putting on. And then to have these kind of associated dinners and events go on where people can get involved and then get involved at the actual Olympic Games. And that could be financially, but also to participate by attending and doing certain events. And so what really the goal is to help these athletes have a better performance, but also there's a part of that which is to help the athletes after they finish competing and give them access and networks to opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, I really like that. I have some Australian execs to send your way.
Okay.
Because you're right, there's only so many coaching jobs, guys. It's like you need to think much broader. But still, what's good for your core? Shifting a little bit, tell me about your latest venture. You seem very passionate about Ryght and what it's doing. And what are you excited about there?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I as you've mentioned, I've been very passionate around this whole kind of cancer topic for a long time. It really started for me when I attended an event that my old college friend put on. She and her husband, who were on the track team with me at New Mexico, lost their daughter to leukemia at the age of 10. Her name was Megan, and they set up meganswings.org as a result. But at one of their events, I was just so torn by the stories, not only her story, but other parents that spoke at that event. And they were in the Inland Empire in California and raised a few $1,000 over a lunch. I thought, well, I could probably help here. And so my buddy and I put on an event for 10 years, once a year. And we had the facility for Kettle One Vodka called Nolet Spirits donate their headquarters and their ballroom. And we raised $1 million over 9 or 10 of those dinners, just doing it once a year for friends. And the maximum capacity was 86. But we got so much support for supporting these families of kids with cancer. Yeah. And then when I had an opportunity to start DeepLens, it was a very emotional reaction for me, because I knew that finally the experience that I had built in technology was being matched up with my passion for maybe helping a little bit in the fight against cancer. And so we started an AI company that helped match cancer patients to clinical trials and successfully sold that 3 years ago. And then I was able to start Ryght on the back of that success. And Ryght uses generative and agentic AI and the concept of creating digital twins or AI site twins, as we call them, basically match sponsors, which are biotech and pharma companies, to the very best clinics and hospitals anywhere in the world that are a great fit for that particular clinical trial. And there are many variables that go into why or why not a site may be a good one for a study, and it's not just how many patients they happen to be treating. And so the AI, because this is a big data problem, the AI is perfect for using agentic AI to pull in the appropriate data to use for the analysis, but then to do the matching and then the automation of the workflow to get that site ultimately activated and patients enrolled. So it's been a bit of a passion now for almost 10 years to help in this way. And we've got 7 great VCs behind the company now, and we've got a young and hungry team and some great tech, and we're going for it.
Excellent. What are you most excited about with what AI can do in med tech? We just had the chancellor of Vanderbilt on. They're investing billions of dollars in research and trials, and so your need for speed is you're solving that. What else are you excited about?
Yeah, I think there's so much that is going to change as a result of this. It's completely game changing. This is bigger and more impactful than even the .com boom, in my opinion. And I think it comes down to that the status quo does not have to be the status quo anymore. Everything is ripe for disruption, but for change for the better. And so think about, these technologies where AI can be used to discover new drugs. They're saying that in the next year or two, more drugs will be discovered than have ever been discovered in the history of humankind before this year. And if you think about that, well, then what's downstream of that? Well, every one of those, in order to become an actual drug that people can take, it needs a clinical trial. But the clinical trial industry is dominated with fax machines and manual processes, which is embarrassing to say, but very true.
Exactly.
And then, you name that all the way down to the patient interaction. There are companies doing extremely well with these ambient scribes that are listening in on the conversation between the patient and the doctor and dropping that into the medical record so the doctor can now focus on the actual engagement with the patient and not be taking notes and worrying about the admin of that, let alone the mistakes that could be made. And it's just countless examples of how everything is going to change as a result of this. But I think at the end of the day, you'll see way more cures for diseases over the next 10 years than have ever been discovered. The problem is it takes a dozen years for a molecule to be, to go through a clinical trial or the 3 or 4 phases of it and then to commercial availability. So it still takes 12 years, but maybe that could be 10 or 9 or 8 years. And that's where I come in with my company. But at the end of the day, I think it's just going to result in a lot of great outcomes for patients, and hopefully millions of lives can be saved.
Amen. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate you being on. Sounds like a good time to be alive here.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, appreciate it. You've been listening to Simon Arkel on the Reboot Chronicles. This is Dean DeBias. Please like us, subscribe, watch us anywhere you get podcasts or at rebootchronicles.com.